This is the first of 3 lesson videos on method of instruction for the Advanced Non-Commissioned Officer course under St. John Brigade, Zone 10, Singapore. For this first lesson, we'll be talking about psychology of instruction. What is psychology? Psychology is the study of the human mind, how the human mind works. And I would like to just say that we're not talking about fake psychology, like for example, if your blood type is B, or your blood type is A, or your blood type is AB, therefore you have certain personality traits, or if you are dreaming of something and therefore it means that you are thinking about certain other things in real life. Those are sort of pseudo psychology, fake psychology. Okay, what we're more interested in are real experimental psychology results from established researchers in universities. And we are going to learn about how psychology relates to motivation, how it relates to memory and learning, and how it relates to the mastery of skills. Okay, the lesson objectives are, after this lesson, you'll be able to name 3 factors that can help improve motivation, name 3 strategies to help improve learning, and to be able to explain the growth mindset and how to create feedback loops. Okay, we're going to talk about motivation first. Motivation means the enthusiasm and the willingness to do something. Okay, saying, yes, I can do it, I will do it. And I think we can look at it from 2 ways. Is that you can either be fearful of something, therefore you want to avoid something. Okay, you do something out of fear, or you do something out of wants. You want something and therefore you work towards it. And I want to bring up a very important concept here called behavior conditioning. I won't go deep into it, but I would like to bring to your attention that a lot of times in St. John, because we are so regimental and disciplinary, we use punishments a lot. For example, 20 push-ups, making people run more, or to do more foot drills. Yeah, but that is very, very short-sighted, because there are actually very different ways of actually helping to change the kind of behavior that you encounter within trainings. Okay, instead of just relying on punishment, can we also rely on rewards to reinforce the behavior? Okay, so there are actually 4 different kinds of behavior conditioning. One is, if somebody does well, you give him a reward. That's positive reinforcement on the top left. On the top right, if this person does not do well, you remove the privileges so that he feels like, oh, it's sort of a punishment. On the bottom left is that he is doing something bad, and therefore you implement punishment. Okay, this is the most common type. And on the bottom right is, if this person does well, you remove the punishment or remove something bad. And I think there's a variety of ways to actually do this. I won't go deep. But one thing I also want to bring to your attention is, as much as possible, we should give our trainees the chance to correct the wrongs they have done, instead of just enforcing more and more punishments. Furthermore, in terms of motivation, we really have to start thinking about not just punishments, but what people want, what trainees want. And there's this thing called self-determination theory. I have modified it slightly, but basically it's about why people are motivated. They are motivated when they have the competence and the ability to deal with the environment. They are motivated when they feel like there's a sense of value and worthiness because there's a purpose in what they're doing. They are motivated when there's a relatedness factor, when they are feeling, the close bonds and friendship with their friends, with their comrades and peers in St. John. Okay, so purpose, competence, relatedness. These 3 are basic needs that your trainees have, and addressing them will help you motivate them better. Okay, first of all, purpose. As always, we need to let people know why we are doing this. If you're studying, it's for the sake of passing certain exams, and in the future, it's for the sake of finding a job, etc., etc. Okay, so likewise, when we are teaching first aid St. John, it's the purpose of passing AFA, BFA. It's for the purpose of treating this casualty when you see him and being able to save lives. Okay, sometimes you need to put this meaning and this purpose out there right in front, because we assume they know, but a lot of times the trainees don't really know. Second, we're going to talk about competence. I would like to introduce the concept of Goldilocks principle. The Goldilocks story is a very common story. You know, a girl got lost in a forest and comes into a bear house, and there were 3 bowls of porridge on the table. The first bowl was too hot. That was Papa's bear's porridge. But Mama bear's porridge, that was too cold. Baby bear's porridge was just right. Okay, so Goldilocks helped herself to the porridge. So this is actually a very, very simple concept, but it's something that we always overlook. I have encountered numerous number of people who like to say, look, let's challenge them, let's push them to their limits, let's give them something that is impossible, and then they will feel very awesome about that. I'm not saying that we should not challenge our trainees, but you must not overwhelm them. So give something within reason. Don't kill off their motivation by putting them in front of something crazy, but don't bore them either. You have to right size and bite size whatever things you are putting in front of your trainees, be it a task, be it a lesson. Okay, right off, you obviously wouldn't on your first day of lesson teach a first Sec 1 trainee on how to pass the BCLS. That's not reasonable. Okay. Next, relatedness. There's a lot of camaraderie and peer pressure in the uniform groups. Okay, you have to be careful about the interpersonal dynamics. Sometimes there are some people who are not so popular, and there are some people who are very popular. You have to be very conscious of all these relationships, and try not to embarrass your trainees in front of each other. Another thing you have to be careful about is to be careful when you use the one suffer, all suffer kind of philosophy. I know that happens a lot, and you feel that it builds a lot of teamwork and team spirit. But in a situation where somebody is already an outcast, if somebody is already unpopular with the rest of the cohort, putting them through one suffer, all suffer kind of punishments will only make the situation worse. Okay, so you have to be careful and manage how all these things relate to motivation. So I'm just going to come up with a acronym to represent all the 3 things that we talked about: purpose, competence, relatedness. And so it's like a backpacker. Okay, a backpacker, he hikes and it's a purpose. He's gonna climb that mountain. He has the ability, the competence to climb the mountain. He has a companion to actually accompany him on his journey. So it's a backpacker. Okay, and now we are going to move on to the memory part. Okay, how do you actually help people learn better and enforce the kind of learning? And this is where it's interesting. I'm gonna start talking about chunking. Okay, first of all, try and remember this string of alphabets within 5 seconds. Okay, how many of you can remember the entire chain of letters? I would think very few. Okay, but I can help you remember it better. How? Let's look at this. If you put spaces in between, doesn't it start to look a bit more familiar? And if we fill each one with an additional S, you start realizing, oh, it's the name of the schools that are in Zone 10. Okay, so now if we go back, how many of you can name the letters that were inside the chain? I'm pretty sure you can name a lot more now. Okay, and this is the so-called chunking. How do we put things together to form a bigger part that makes sense? Okay, so in the case of DRS ABC, because we remember DRS ABC, so we can remember the 6 steps. Okay, because although it was a bit lame, but I had an acronym called PACKER. So you remember there's a P, there's a C, there's a R. So you remember there's purpose, competence, and relatedness. Okay, this is the so-called chunking and mnemonical hooks that can help you remember knowledge taught in classroom better. Another important component that we need to be cautious of is that the reality is we forget after we learn. Within 1 hour after learning, more than half of the information will be lost. And we need to do something called spaced repetition to make sure that our trainees can maximize the amount of information they retain. So every time they learn something, you should always do a revision at the end of the session. Okay? After the end of the session, within 1 day to a week, you should do a revision again. After which, within 1 month, you should do a revision again. And maybe after that, 6 months. So why this spaced repetition is because we forget very quickly when we have only learned something once. Okay, but when we have learned something several times, the rate that we forget is slower. Okay, I will explain a bit more on why later. I will now move on to this third strategy called higher order learning. When we teach, we should not be satisfied with having our trainees only recognizing the information. What do you mean by recognizing? Okay, it's like the situation where you encounter a friend on the street. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have had this situation before. You see a friend. Most probably that was your primary school classmate. But wait, you cannot remember what his name is. And that is a problem. Okay? Likewise, a lot of the knowledge and information we learn in St. John, if you see it on the slides, you see it in the textbook, you know that you learned it before. But when you need to use it, when you encounter a casualty, you just cannot recall and remember the steps. And that is a problem. Okay, so we must not be satisfied with recognition, which is very low. It's not even considered a basic level of learning. Okay, we need to be going upwards. After you remember the information, you need to understand it. After you understand it, you need to be able to apply it in new ways. Okay, how do we do that? Asking somebody to recall is just the remembering part. Asking somebody to answer the question why and to explain is to show his understanding. Asking somebody to look at a case, for example, a first aid long case, a first aid short case, something that is unfamiliar to him, and ask him, look, use whatever you have learned before and apply it to this case. That is the third level. I will not go further into analyzing, evaluating, and creating because those are levels that are a bit beyond what we expect of St. John cadets in the secondary school level. Okay, for memory, I would say that it's really like writing in the sand. You write those words in the sand, but when the wind comes, when the waves come, the sand will be washed off. The words will get fainter and fainter and eventually disappear. It's the same as the memory. Our memory, through our use of our brains, will slowly forget. And so, what we must do is to keep carving those words in. Carving it deeper and deeper, and using more permanent, harder sand, for example. Okay, or even put in twigs or stones to help solidify the words. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Okay, in memory, you have to keep writing, just like spaced repetition. We have to use different techniques like chunking, like higher order learning, so that we can carve the words deeper and use other tools to secure them. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the concept of mastery. Mastery meaning being so good at your skill. Okay, it's not just knowledge, but being able to be effective when the real life calls for it. And I think a very important concept we have to learn here is the growth mindset. If you read this comic, you realize, oh, Calvin over here is talking to this girl and he is shocked that this girl actually does all the studying just to understand things. And he walks away saying, I used to think you were smart. And that's one of those assumptions. If a person is good, he's clever, it means he's clever, it means he'll perform well. No. Whatever we do, it's always based on effort. Okay, sure, some people might learn faster than others, but if you don't put in effort, okay, you will never be a good expert. Okay? So, as a trainer, as an instructor, you must always believe that your trainees will grow. They will become good at, be it first aid, foot drill, leadership, and they have the space to grow. And to do that, you need to help them by providing feedback. Okay, give them good feedback. Be positive. Don't just scold them. Don't just issue punishments. You need to be more nurturing. Okay, tell them where they did well so that they will keep repeating the things that they did good and stop the things that they did not so good. Okay, be specific and always give a next step. Don't just dismiss them and say, you know, that was crappy effort. No, that does not help your trainee. You must help them by telling, look, You can improve by doing this and this. You can improve by incorporating more of this technique. Okay, tell them. And sometimes we can sort of make them run this process themselves. What do you mean make them run this process themselves? They should be allowed to experiment and explore, but they need to know what it means to learn from their own mistakes. You have to tell them, look, this is the criteria of success. This is how you can practice. Why don't you try it for yourself for half an hour? Okay, try and get the right response from the mannequin, for example. However, as a trainer, as an instructor, you do need to look out for them. We are supposed to let our trainees have some time to practice and explore, but always protect them from the worst consequences. Okay, so if you have a real life casualty situation and if you think it's beyond what the trainee can handle, then you should take over. So mastery, all in all, is like our trainees being blindfolded archers. They are trying to shoot the arrows and hit the target, but they can't see. They don't know what success looks like. They cannot see how to aim the arrow. And you as the trainer and an instructor, you're supposed to tell them, look, aim your arrow lower. Look, pull your bow harder. Shoot further. Okay? And this is what your feedback does. It helps them to aim better and become more proficient at whatever skill they are learning. But of course, remember to protect them from consequences that they are not prepared to shoulder. Make sure that they do not cause harm to themselves or to others. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick recap on the 3 analogies I use. For motivation, okay, a motivated backpacker. So what are the 3 points from the motivation segment? Yes, purpose, competence, and relatedness. These 3 are factors related to motivation. For memory, yes, writing in sand. So there are actually 3 strategies I talked about: chunking, spaced repetition, and higher order learning. Lastly, about mastery, blindfolded archer. Have a growth mindset. Give them feedback and help them build feedback loops so that they can learn and practice on their own. Okay, that concludes the first lesson of the 3-part lesson on MOI. The second part lesson will be on lesson planning. The third part lesson will be on lesson delivery. And I hope that you have gained some things from this lesson. If there are any questions, please feel free to approach your instructors. Once again, thank you very much.